Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series and our program, Criminal Mischief. I'm your host, DP Lyle. And today I have a very fun and fascinating guest you're going to love. His name is Charles Lutz. Um, and Charles, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate talking to you. You know, most of our viewers on Criminal Mischief and listeners are crime writers and true crime writers and are people who just have an interest in criminology and crime stories. And so we talk about both real crime and fictional crime and everything else on here. Now, you got a BA in political science from Penn State, and then way back in the Vietnam era, after an ROTC program, I remember those. I was in ROTC in college. It was mandatory, actually. And
Yes.
yeah, and then you served in Vietnam as an intelligence officer. What did you do there? How was that?
Well, I guess that's kind of an oxymoron,
Yeah,
Army intelligence, but
exactly.
actually, I started out as I call it, sitting on the bench, a Saigon warrior, assigned to a couple of staff positions, and it may sound foolish, but I wanted to get out into the field. Um, I I applied a couple of times for field assignments and didn't work. And one night I was in a bar with some buddies in Saigon and just joking around. I said, if they had me in the field, this war would have been over a long time ago. And there's some guy at the end of the bar. He said, "Excuse me, Lieutenant." He said, "Maybe I can help you." I said, "Well, who are you?" Turns out he was a sergeant with MACV, which is Military Assistance Advisory Command. I left my name and serial number on a bar napkin and forgot all about it. And about 2 weeks later, I get orders to go out in the field.
Wow. And then did you say, "Uh-oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this"?
Well, you have second thoughts, but it was too late then. But I
Exactly.
have to say, I did get out in the field. I mean, again, it may sound foolish, but I had studied our great military leaders, and I thought, this was my chance um, to prove to myself that I had the courage and
Yeah.
the ability to survive in that kind of an environment. And
Well,
uh,
you won a Bronze Star, so you must have done something good.
for doing a good job, but I
Yeah,
was I was no hero.
yeah.
But
Ah,
most of the
you're a hero just
heroes,
for being there. Well, after Vietnam, you moved on and went to become a special agent with the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. Didn't that isn't that what evolved into the DEA?
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and then so you moved on in the late '70s to be an agent with the DEA at headquarters. What was all that about? What did you do during that time period? The '70s were obviously a high drug volume period of time in this country.
Yes, heroin was up and down the East Coast. I started on the job in Philadelphia, and I learned, kind of the trade of being a special agent. But my desire the whole time was to go back overseas. I had enjoyed my time as an advisor in Vietnam, and in fact, that's why I went with Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs because they had about 10% of their agent workforce stationed overseas, and so you had to be. It was kind of a novel thought. You had to be an agent first before they would let you go overseas and teach others how to be agents. So 3 years was the minimum time you needed domestically. The day I had 3 years on a job, I put in to go overseas, and they sent me to Bangkok, Thailand.
Welcome to the Southeast Asia again, right?
Exactly.
That's cool. Um, when you moved when it evolved into the DEA and all that, so you went to Southeast Asia then, and then later you ended up in Cairo at some
That's
point in your
correct. I
career.
I did 4 years in Bangkok, and when I got back, I was assigned to our training division at headquarters. Within, I guess, 6 months, they advertised a supervisory level position in Cairo, Egypt. It wasn't much of a supervisory job. It was the only one-man office in DEA at that time. But I told my wife, I said, I may just get a chance at this job because I had become known to our DEA administrator at that time, Peter Benzinger. And I told my wife, Joy, I said, I might just get this. So let me know if it's okay to apply. And she said, well, our two daughters were young. She said, if we're going to go back overseas, let's do it now. So I put in and I got Cairo. That's a long story as well, but I wrangled regional responsibility there. So I traveled mostly to Lebanon, which was the heart of the Middle Eastern heroin trade, as well as the producing country for the majority of hashish in the world. So
where did they get their product from? Did it come out of Afghanistan? A lot of it.
A lot of it, Iran,
Iran,
Afghanistan.
That's where the poppy fields
and
were.
they produce it, the heroin itself in laboratories in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. And of course, they grew marijuana there. It was like Christmas tree farms.
Exactly.
And produced the hashish from that.
Well, so they bring the raw product, the opium across into Lebanon. They create the hashish and stuff. What were their major pathways at that time period? Now they have submarines for Christ's sake. But what was their major pathways for getting the drugs across the pond and into the Europe and into the U.S. and all of that? What mechanisms did they use? Was it overland? Was it by ships? Was it airplanes? Was it everything? What?
Well, at that time, it seemed to be mostly by ship.
Right.
And it would go from Lebanon, for example, into Italy for the most part. And from there would be sent by, organized crime groups there in Italy to the United States.
Right. Yeah. And so you were involved in tracking all of that and
most of my
trying to
work,
interdict.
most of it was interdiction. I did have a couple of cases while I was there, but when you work by yourself, you have nobody to back you up. So it got a little bit dangerous at times. And of course, Beirut was a war zone.
Yes.
So I would go into that environment and basically try and collect the intelligence needed for others to take action elsewhere.
They, for the most part, knew who you were.
Yeah.
I mean, they knew you were a U.S. DEA agent.
Yeah, there had been a CIA officer abducted, figured being deep, although there's a lot of them there that thought that because I was DEA, I was carrying around a bag full of money to pay informants. And so that had its risks as well.
Well, it's amazing how drug use has evolved over the years. Back in the 60s, when I was in medical, 60s and 70s, when I was in my medical training, it was marijuana and heroin were big. And then this drug called angel dust, phencyclidine, PCP came along, and I didn't think I would ever see anything worse than that until methamphetamine came along. It gets worse. The PCP was crazy. Well, of course, after all of that, you get on into the 70s and 80s, and cocaine became big, and that became the drug. And I understand you spent some time in Florida, Broward County area, and this was during the time of the cocaine cowboys and all of that stuff. What was that like?
Well, it was an exciting time. If you want to be a narc, you want to be where the drugs are.
Right.
And the drugs were in South Florida.
Yeah.
So when I came back from Cairo, I was assigned again to headquarters, staff positions there, but I volunteered to go down to the vice president's task force, was assigned as a supervisor in Broward County. And that's really where I got my first taste of cocaine, not literally.
Yeah.
But, made some cocaine cases there and made up my mind that I wanted to come back as a manager in our Miami field division.
Now, was it as violent as is portrayed? I mean, were there people run around with automatic weapons and shoot you dead on a heartbeat?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any domestic supervisor experience, so they wouldn't promote me. I had to go to Reno, Nevada first
Ah,
as the agent in charge there to get my domestic supervisor experience. And with less than 2 years, I was promoted to my dream job in Miami. Um, and I can tell you that many of our investigations started with a dead body.
yeah.
We worked very closely with Metro-Dade Homicide in those days. And, they would find the body and then we would identify who that person was involved with, what gang, what group, and give the police some idea of what the motive might be for the killing.
Was this during the Escobar years, or was it a little before?
It was well, it was an interesting time because they talk about cocaine cowboy era. In those days, it started out with the Cuban Americans um, buying the cocaine from the Colombians and then distributing it domestically.
Right.
Um, it didn't take long though for the Colombians to figure out who was making all the money.
Right.
So they decided they were going to take over the distribution domestically from the Cuban Americans, and that's when all the violence began.
Right. Yeah, and Miami became a hot spot for that, and
Exactly.
yeah, it became crazy and crazy. Who was the woman that was so famous? I'm forgetting her name.
Oh,
Um, and she became the queen of
yeah,
cocaine down
yeah,
there.
exactly. I can't
Yeah,
think of
yeah,
her name
yeah.
off the
I
top of my
know her
head.
name. I can see her picture, but I can't
Mm.
remember her name.
But she was one of the very first Colombians to come to America to take over distribution from the Cubans.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And she. They understand she was ruthless. I mean,
Yes.
she made Pablo look like a wimp. She she was really ruthless.
Mm.
Um, So you ultimately ended up in the Caribbean and trying to disrupt the Colombian cartels. I'm assuming that's Medellin and those places. Um, how did that come about, and how did you like dealing in South America rather than South Florida?
Well, I had been in Miami for a year when President Reagan brought the military into the interdiction zone, primarily in the Caribbean.
Right.
And I happened to be the only manager in Miami in those days that had both foreign and military experience. So they picked me to take over all of our Caribbean operations and coordinate our activities with the military. And we had an air mobile operation called OpBat in the Bahamas, supported by customs, supported by the military, that took down um, tons and tons of cocaine from these Colombian smugglers, kind of discouraging them from using their favored route through the Caribbean to South Florida. They even went so far as to start moving into Haiti. So I opened a DEA office in Port-au-Prince,
Hmm.
and within a year, basically the Colombians gave up on the Caribbean. They didn't want to go to Mexico because the Mexicans have their own brand of ruthlessness, but we kind of forced that to happen, regrettably in some ways. I mean, we were doing our job in the Caribbean, but it created an even bigger problem, the one that we still face today,
Right.
of involving the Mexican drug cartels.
Yeah. Which were massive, and they
Yeah.
keep eating each other, but obviously, they get down to Sinaloa and a bunch of others, and then it became,
Right.
yeah, El Chapo and his crowd. Yeah.
Exactly. Then you're talking about South American. Well,
Yeah.
I spent 3 years in charge of Caribbean operations, the best job in DEA, without a doubt. I mean, whenever there's a cold front moving into Miami, I found a reason to run down to Jamaica or Dominican Republic or the Bahamas. Uh, but again, Vietnam came back to kind of haunt me in the sense that, again, because of my military experience, there had been an operation begun in South America called Snowcap to go after the cocaine base and paste laboratories, particularly in Bolivia and Peru, that were feeding the cocaine hydrochloride laboratories in Colombia. Um, it was supported by the military, or U.S. military, um, and but it was kind of the operation was kind of getting off the law enforcement track, more into a kind of a paramilitary type operation. So I got yanked up to Washington to take over Snowcap. Um, it was the only time I didn't volunteer to make a move. Uh, but after a while, I found that it was a very effective program, and I'm glad I did that. And even during that time, the Colombians started using Guatemala to land cocaine for overland shipment to the southwest border, and so I started an operation called Cadence in Guatemala, kind of a hybrid between OpBat, air mobile operations, with snowcap trained jungle experts. And we virtually shut down that movement of cocaine within a year.
Hmm. No easy task.
It was an exciting time.
Yeah, I bet. Well, then, 9/11 came along and you retired from the DEA and you ended up going to the Orlando International Airport as a security director. How, how did that transition happen and what was that job about?
Well, in federal law enforcement, the mandatory retirement age is 57. I was within a year of mandatory retirement when 9/11 hit. And of course, um, if you were to take, if a federal retiree takes another federal job, his salary is reduced by the size of his annuity. And I tell people I would have done almost anything to get even with Osama bin Laden, but working for nothing was not one
It
of them.
was not one of them.
And then Congress decided, since TSA had no senior leadership, that they would waive that requirement for up to 5 years to allow senior executives from government to start the TSA. And so
Mhm.
as soon as that happened, I retired from DEA and went to Orlando. Not exactly a retirement job. I had 1,000 screeners
Yeah.
in Miami. And what few people realize is at that time, the government set minimum standards for screeners. You had to be 21 years of age, an American citizen, speak English at the eighth grade level, uh, no serious criminal record. Only 10% of the screeners nationwide who had been working on 911 could qualify. So in Miami, I'm sorry, in Orlando, we ended up having to hire about 600 new screeners, some of whom had never been in an airport before, let alone did security screening in one. So it's little wonder there were long lines.
Right.
I call TSA the agency everyone loved to hate, but I think
Yep.
over the
Yep.
years it has matured, and I
Yes,
think
I
today
agree.
you don't have those kind of problems.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. Yeah, there's a whole generation of people that don't remember when you could just walk on an airplane, you,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
and
true.
9/11 changed all of that. And it's still amazing to me that that organization, TSA, that they could actually put it together as quickly as they did and at least make it functional, even though, as you pointed out, it was a lot of warts on it. But I mean, this is a massive undertaking.
Well, it's the largest bureaucracy created since World War II.
Yeah,
And I have to say, the only thing we haven't mentioned my book
we're,
here,
we're getting to that very soon.
right?
Yes.
But I was just going to say, I think the two chapters in my book about those early days of TSA are the only thing I know of that's been written about those years.
Huh. I like that. Well, let's talk about that. Here's the book here. Um, this is basically your story of all the things that you were involved in, uh, kind of fleshing out kind of what we've just kind of skipped over. Tell us about it. How did you decide to sit down and put pen to paper and do this?
Well, I always enjoyed writing. And of course, in law enforcement, it's just the facts, ma'am.
Yes.
There is no such thing as creative writing. So when I retired, I decided now's my time to write. I joined a writers club in my local community. I took a number of courses online. And of course, you write what you know. So I started writing stories about my, things happening during my career, different cases, operations, things like that. And my colleagues in the club encouraged me to write a book. And I thought, well, that should be easy. It's not easy. It took me about 2 years to pull all
Exactly.
these stories together and put them together in some logical fashion. But I
Right.
also tried to recognize not just me, but the people who worked with me and for me, and that I
Sure.
worked for, that quite frankly would otherwise be forgotten and never mentioned. So I tried to
Right.
document in this book their stories as well.
Well, I mean, well, your career has spanned and wandered through, in and out, meandered through so many levels of federal law enforcement. It's amazing. I mean, your experience in so many areas, starting in the Vietnam intelligence and, ending up in the DEA and moving on through all that stuff. It's amazing. Fantastic to put the story out there so that people kind of know more about it. And especially the TSA, like you said, it's a group that people love to hate, but at the same time, I'm glad they're there.
Yeah.
You know.
There's never been a repeat of 9/11 since
Exactly.
then. So
Exactly. Exactly.
that's not by accident.
No, 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 no. And like I said, to put that entity together as quickly as they did was amazing.
Mhm.
It just shows you what people can do when they're under pressure. And obviously the pressure was huge because you had to get the airlines back in the air and you had
Yeah.
to do it safely and you couldn't have another 9/11. I mean, yeah, I mean the pressure was huge as you were right there in the middle of it, so So
Yeah.
yeah. Now you do some private investigation now, or
Well, not now. After I
you did?
retired, I did some private investigations for insurance companies and the like. I did some international consulting work, and then for 10 years, I did background investigations part time for
Yeah.
the Department of State. But today, I am fully retired.
Okay. Good. Good. Uh, and what are you working on now? Are you
My
going to try
golf
to?
game.
Are you going to write another book?
I think I'm a one trick pony when it comes to books. I
Well,
might, but I'll
uh,
tell you, I decided after I wrote this book, I'm never going to write another word about myself.
yeah,
So I actually took a fiction writing course at Clemson University
that's what I
near
was going
where
to
I
say.
live.
Yes.
And but I quickly learned that in order to write fiction, you need an imagination. I ain't got one.
Oh, you might surprise yourself. You might surprise yourself. But that's it. That's if you can take the real stories that you've lived and then create a fictional story out of them. And I always tell writers, especially new writers, you have this huge story in front of you. Remember, tell a small story to tell a big story. So tell the story of an individual in a situation where things are going wrong and he's got to fix the problem, whatever that is. Maybe it's finding a meth lab, somewhere. But using your experience, you might surprise yourself if you just sit down and start writing it. You never know.
Well, I may give it a try.
I'd like to
Thanks
see
for
it.
encouraging me.
Yeah, no, it keeps your brain working too. So, where can people get this book?
Well, it's available on Amazon.com,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Okay. Where did the title come from?
Well, as I was writing it, I started thinking, Vietnam, the most unpopular war in our history.
Hmm.
DEA certainly unpopular with many, and this snowcap operation unpopular with many within DEA. Um, and TSA, of course, the agency everyone loved to hate.
Right.
And after I retired, I worked on restoring the record and reputation of the first commissioner of narcotics, who was a hated man by the pro-marijuana legalization folk
Right.
for him having drafted the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. And he had been basically forgotten by history, uh, even forsaken by his descendants in the DEA. So
Hmm.
I set about to restore his record and reputation. Today, the International Conference Room at DEA headquarters is named in his honor, and there's a plaque that had been awarded to him upon retirement by the mayor of his hometown, Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. That plaque has been restored.
Well, Charles, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and you have an amazing story, an amazing career, and I mean that. I'm in awe, and all the things it. So, in this country. Yeah. So I really, really appreciate you coming on. And I do hope you write a fictional book about some of your stories, maybe multiple fictional books about it, because I think it would be really cool.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity.
Well, I want to thank everybody for spending time here with me and Charles, and I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you got inspired to do stuff on your own. And until then, as you know, this has been Criminal Mischief here on the Outliers YouTube and channel and podcast series, and we'll be back with more stories and more great guests. And until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun, and try not to get caught.